I wanted to make an intro, but I'm lazy and I don't have ideas.
This is Mr. Peabody and Sherman. The movie starts at one of Taylor Swift's thousands of expensive houses. We're given a fourth wall break by Mr. Hector James Peabody, which I know is his full name because I checked Wikipedia. As you can see, I'm an enemy to English teachers everywhere. They don't say it in the movie though. He's played by a guy who my brother says has aged beautifully. Damn. He was probably genetically engineered, or he has a human brain within his dog brain, because he's highly educated in all fields of human knowledge, unlike other dogs.
I'm not like other dogs. I'm smart.
Just for funsies, he invented things that in real life were created by Fred Carter, Scott Amy, Angel Marshall, Franz Beckenbauer, Andy Hildebrand, Jeff Tatum, and Beto Perez. Then we meet his adoptive son, Kion. I haven't seen The Lion Guard, but I like to look at cast lists and see what other stuff they've been in. Kion inspired the Orange Portal robot, who's actually meant to be female, to build a time machine, the Wayback, which he uses to teach him about history. But the thing is, and I'm saying it this early on, you two could use that time machine to prevent serious injustices in our world. So they go to revolutionary France, where they meet Marie Antoinette, but not Louis XVI for some reason. I'm sure he'd be there too. Marie stuffing her face with cake, even though she didn't actually say let them eat cake, as the movie implies that the Reign of Terror happened the same year the Bastille was stormed. Regardless, it sticks those events together as Robespierre and his gang pop in and bring them all to the guillotine, except for Sherman, even though kids lost their heads too. Mr. P survives and explains why he could avoid getting decapitated, but really it's just because his head's as wide as his body. They sword fight with Robespierre in the sewer like they're French versions of the Ninja Turtles and blast out of there with the world's biggest lab explosion.
All those guys getting their heads chopped off and nobody stand up and saying it wasn't right.
You guys could have spoken up, you know. So then they go home. Keep that in your back pocket. The next day, it's Sherman's first day of school, and later in the movie, he's stated to be 7, meaning he's in 1st or 2nd grade. And remember, Sherman, if I ever see a sea turtle, I'll ask him how old he is for you.
Okay, Mr. Peabody.
Before he goes in, Mr. PB gives him a dog whistle, which he can use to call him when he needs him, meaning that he kinda gave Sherman his first phone. Who can tell me who this is?
George Washington.
Good job.
Did you know that me and my dad could have stopped him from becoming a president? We could have stopped this country from existing. We could have stopped colonization.
You've said enough, Sherman. So Sherman's knowledge about this guy results in a little falling out between him and his classmates, Sophia the First.
You must be exhausted. Wouldn't you rather store all that power in an amulet?
The roar's overpowered too.
Why don't we just let Athena P and her subs decide who's more OP?
Shut up, Carl.
Then Sophia puts Kion in a chokehold and strangles him with her amulet. But it's really weird when you think about it, because Mr. Peabody is apparently a business titan, inventor, scientist, Nobel laureate, gourmet chef, and 2-time Olympic medalist. Also, he can play way more instruments than my junior year math teacher, who I've seen play 3 woodwinds. And Sherman's classmates could only dream of living in that kind of home. But I digress. Later, Mr. PB&J is called to the principal's office where he explains the predicament to him. He pulls out a list of plans and sheets and stuff that tell me he could homeschool Sherman if he wanted to, but then it's revealed that Sherman bit that girl Penny in self-defense. Yeah, Penny. Her name is Penny. Out steps the speciesist CPS agent Miss Grunion.
Don't be speciesist.
And she says this.
It's normal for children to tease. It's not normal for them to bite.
Ma'am, she swatted his food, swiped his property, and held him in a chokehold like I said. Nonetheless, she believes Mr. P in a pod is not a good parent for Sherman and decides to come to his home the next night for an investigation. That night they discuss what happened. What on earth brought this on?
She called me a weakling.
She's just jealous of you because we're rich. Now get some rest.
I love you, Mr. Pickles.
I have a deep regard for you as well, Kion. And he looks at the pictures on the wall and reminisces on all the trips through time he and Sherman went on and when he found and adopted him. And while this montage is wholesome, it makes me wonder, how young was Sherman when Mr. Peabody adopted him? He said that he inspired him to build the Wayback, so when did he? And how long did it take him? The next evening, which for a movie that focuses a lot on time, I'm not sure what day of the week it is, Mr. Platypus is pulling out all the stops, hard at work cooking up a fancy meal for a dinner party with Penny's family so they can hopefully fix everything. Sherman and Penny try to bond in his room while Mr. Peanut tries to make a good impression on her parents. Sherm can't seem to click with Penny Penn because she doesn't believe what he knows about historical figures like Georgie Porgy. So despite being told not to, he takes her to the Wayback, and he shares with her this tidbit of information.
Mr. Peabody says you should never use the Wayback to travel to a time when you existed. How come? There'd be 2 of you.
So then how are they able to go back home from their trips? Again, keep this in mind. So they hop in so Penny can take it for a spin, while Mr. Pepperoni and the Petersons get jiggly with it. But as they enjoy their little homespun concoction he likes to call Einstein on the beach, Sherman gets home and takes his dad aside, stimming through his explanations. Why did you do this?
She called me a liar for
So you took her to see Anne Boleyn?
Yeah!
Sorry, not sorry about what I... So after Mr. Pacific puts them in a trance for a while, they're going back in time to ancient Egypt to get Penny out the city. That's right, they're going back. Also, I think is Arabic because that's what they speak in Egypt now. I might be wrong.
Now, bring on the mani-pedi.
They don't know what a mani-pedi is, Penny. But then they find out that she's engaged to King Tutankhamun, voiced by Steven Universe. Now, to the movie's credit, they showed that ancient Egypt wasn't full of white people, but there's quite some talk of how cruel and barbaric this society is.
A beacon of progress on the horizon of humanity, but a cruel and barbarous civilization just the same. I just hope Penny isn't suffering too badly.
But when the Grand Vizier and also Tut's great uncle, starts making wedding plans, they lock them up inside the Sphinx. Now, earlier, Penny got a makeover and called herself Hatshepsut, so what if they met up with Thutmose II instead? He and Tut both married their half-sisters, apparently. But we proceed. If I didn't know any better, I'd say the movie was trying to ship you with Penny.
It can't be serious. We're only 7.
On their way to get out of there via the boats of Ra, they cross a booby trap with a fun little rhyme. The movie theater popcorn comes straight to the seat. Eat too much popcorn, intestines will heat. Also, why couldn't you have just stepped on them together? Either way, they get to the boats, and when Sherman accidentally gets on the wrong boat, Mr. Perilous does some Tom Cruise type stunts to bring him on the right one. When they pop out of there and crash into the sand, Sherman gets sand in his mouth. A sensory nightmare. Over in some kind of main square, the wedding begins as commanded by the sun god Ra. Suddenly, they pull out a sword thing for a blood oath. The writers want to show how brutish I am! Stop the wedding! Wait, why? 'Cause Ra told me he changed his mind about the whole thing, actually. Silly Ra, silly sun god. He's such a silly guy. He tells them to bring Penny to the gates of the city, but the Anubis head breaks apart, blowing their cover. And in the epic chase sequence that ensues, involving landing in a cart of veggies and being bombarded by spears, they escape Eye and the guards and fly back through time and space. But on their way back to the dinner party, get it, because the way back, they run low on power, so they have to make a sudden pit stop in Florence, as it was in the Cinquecento Renaissance, where everybody's speaking the English like this. They go to see the Renaissance man named after the Blue Ninja Turtle and My Lady Lisa, who doesn't sound like a roughly 25-year-old woman.
I have not seen any of them, Leonardo, because I'm sitting here all day on my abundance.
Unless there are 25-year-olds who do sound like that, in which case I'm sorry for offending you. Also, I called her My Lady because Mona is a formal honorific that means My Lady. Now, here's where Mr. Perplexed is mixing up his Ninja Turtles, because he's asking Leo to help him recharge the way back, even though it's Donnie who has a way with machines. But Leo accepts, even though he still needs Lisa to smile for the camera. Canvas. And then she does, after Mr. Pratfall breaks something that likely would have been shown in the Louvre. And while they're building a mechanism to generate power, Sherman tries to help.
I can fix it!
But then Penny convinces Sherman to slack off from what he's supposed to be doing and go explore with her. So he does what I would do in this situation and not stay focused on his task. In contrast to what he would have done in Mutant Mayhem, Leo's totally chill with it. Okay. In the attic of Leo's house, they discovered the prototype for Leo's flying machine, which Penny wants to take out for a fly, so she tricks Sherman into telling her how it works.
So basically, it's flying from this big old boat right here into the wind, where it'll float until we inevitably crash into someone.
Sounds fun.
Oh no!
Why can't kids be as simple as machines? I don't know, nobody wants me or my brothers to have kids with April. To convince Sherman to steer the flyer, Penny lets go of the controls and they almost plummet to their deaths until Sherman gives in and takes the joysticks. And as Sophia and Kion glide through the air, they're getting along a lot better, forgetting about their power dispute. Could you imagine if her amulet combined power with his roar? Again, I've never seen the Lion Guard and I haven't watched Sophia the First in years, but if that happened, they would be capable of anything. But all jokes aside, they're having fun together with no romantic implications at that. But when Leo and Mr. Peppermint see them, the latter worries for his son's safety. And when he tells them that he doesn't know how to fly, Sherman's skill instantly regresses and they almost fell a tree. Ouch! Thankfully, they're both alive, and Leo's thrilled that his flyer worked, but Mr. Pissed Off isn't so much. And while they're going home, and Leo wasn't fazed at all by any of this, Sherman gets scolded.
He was amazing.
Sherman destroyed a priceless historical artifact.
But it doesn't really matter either way, because there's probably no actual flying machine. We've only ever seen concept drawings of it. But then Penny reminds him that Miss Grunion plans on taking Sherman away from him, which disheartens both him and Sherman. Suddenly, they come across a black hole, and as Mr. Pacifier tries to pull them out, Kion questions why he wasn't informed of Miss Sardine-sized Teleos fish wanting to take him from him, resulting in an argument.
You didn't think my roar was powerful enough!
Kion, stop!
Don't talk to me like that! I'm not a weakling!
What was that?
I said I'm
While the power of your roar is intimidating YouTubers!
Oh.
And after Mr. Parental Control saves them all, they jerk forward with a flash and crash into another ancient time period. They discover that Sherman's gone off to fight in the Trojan War with Patrick Warburton.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
But, like, the Trojan War is a famous story from Greek mythology. Though the Mycenaeans made a gold funerary mask for Agamemnon, he's a figure from Greek mythology. Also, there are several other mythological figures in this horse. Menelaus, Odysseus, Ajax, Oedipus, Achilles is also name-dropped.
Remember what happened to Achilles? That whole thing with this heel?
Though it is evident that Troy was a real city, and the date it fell seems to vary by historian. But I'm gonna do you all a favor and stop pretending I know anything about Greek mythology. Also, there's no mention of Helen or going in to take her back anywhere. Just throwing that out. Anyway, Mr. Peeping Tom and Sophia sneak in with a smaller wooden horse, but Sherman refuses to go with them. It's time for you to come back home, mister.
Sorry, I'm a mythological figure now.
He took an oath. But he's 7.5! So Shermanus heads off to prove himself to his father, while his father tries to warn him about what's going to happen. Are we seeing parallels here? And in they go to make the Trojan dogs eat their bronze, but it's too late for poor Kion. He's caught in the crossfire of, as Mr. Perceptive puts it, one of history's most ferocious conflicts. But would you believe this kid's movie doesn't have any blood or dead bodies shown? So Sherman, who, just like Penny, went off to do something he hadn't really thought through and ended up putting himself in imminent danger, blows his dog whistle for Mr. Plucky, who comes running to defend him because it's his job as his dad to keep him safe. He promises him while fighting off Trojans in slow-mo that he won't let Miss Grunion take him away. As he and Kion try to climb back inside the enormous wooden horse, it rolls away with Sophia inside, and she doesn't have her amulet, so she can't get out herself. So then they become cowboys. Giddy up!
This ain't appropriate music for this here time period.
Gotcha!
We done rubbed that horse, partner.
Yeehaw! Oh no, my dress!
As the Trojan horse proceeds to fall into a ravine with the kids inside, Mr. Philanthropic gets them out with a circus trick, but goes down with the horse.
Mr. Pineapple! Mr. Puppetry! Daddy!
With Mr. Problem presumed dead, Kion and Sophia sit there with the city of Troy still intact behind them, not knowing what to do. But then Sherman gets an idea, and he and Penny run to the way back to travel back to their time to find Mr. Present there. But Penny recalls that you shouldn't use it to go back to a time when you existed, and the machine warns him of this. So if you really can't do that, then again, how are Mr. Peabody and Sherman able to go home after their historical visits? And after Penny stuck around in Egypt, how was Sherman able to go back home to tell Mr. Peabody about it? Was he already messing up the flow of time and space and there just wasn't two of him until after coming back from Troy? Is there a certain thing you have to type into the machine to go back to your time with no harm done? Why is the machine only warning Sherman about this now? How does this work? But anyway, they dangerously fly back to Taylor's expensive penthouse just like she does every day, where they find Mr. Party Animal pouring drinks like he's the Black Eyed Peas, having a feeling that tonight's gonna be a good night. The kids call him over and explain everything that happened. Then Sherman meets his double, but Penny doesn't have one. They still have a hard time believing that Mr. Pyrite died in Troy, showing it with the eyebrow raise. Both of the Kions seem enthusiastic about staying together and being twinsies, but they can't be in the same timeline. Penny's parents come over to check on them, and they say they're having a toga party, though this isn't Peabody University. Miss Grunion arrives then and there for her investigation, and everybody notices there are two Kions in the room. There are two Mr. Plurals in the room as well. Kion, I've got to get you out of here before you touch yourself. That sounded horrible out of context!
But you're not dead!
Just for that, Miss Fish decides to drag Kion away, but as she grabs both Kions, they touch each other and collide into one. Although they're back to normal, they ripped a hole in the fabric of time, and when Miss Grunion tries again to take Sherman away, Mr. Prepolar's Papa Dog instincts kick in, and he bites her. As she calls the cops, they run to their giant space apple to fix everything, and fly out into the city because they can't go back through time. All of the historical figures they met fall through a big sky vortex into their time.
Fortnite effect!
And it's not just them, monuments come down too. When Agamemnon lays eyes on Miss Grunion, he falls head over Achilles' heels in love. In another chase involving Einstein walking down a crosswalk, and talking with a New York accent even though he was German,
Hey, I'm walking here.
Beethoven becoming a pro at DDR, and the evils of life in Hot Pursuit, they end up crashing in the Grand Army Plaza. Animal Control then pulls up to arrest Mr. Perpetrator.
Don't you know what happens to dogs that bite?
Does this imply he's gonna get put down? That's what we should be doing to all multi-billionaires in all honesty. But then Kion steps up to defend him.
I'm a powerful, influential figure too!
And everybody seconds his statement, including Sophia. Then Miss Fishy says they can't change the law to pardon him, so they bring in yet another powerful figure to do it. I say you should let him go, even though I was a slave owner. I do too! Wait a minute, who is that?
That's Bill Clinton.
Oh. So Mr. Pardon Doggy is free, but the hole in the sky gets larger and more monuments fall from it. And you'd think Louis would be there to comfort his wife, but no. So they all come together to think of a way to get to the past and stop it. But then, Kion has a really big idea.
Why not go to the sure.
Kion, she's going to call you Marty now! For this to work, Mr. Pressing Buttons has to reprogram the machine, meaning that Marty's going to drive it. This kid's able to narrowly avoid getting crushed by the falling structures and get the machine to reach speeds it never went at before. And don't say it. You already made this joke in one of your edits. Don't do it, Haley. You're gonna look lazy. Don't do it! The Wayback hits 88 miles per hour. The hole in the sky sucks everything back up, and everybody gets taken back to their respective time periods. Agamemnon forcibly picks Miss Grunion up and drags her back to his time with him. Aww, isn't that just the epitome of true love? A few seconds later, the Wayback appears in the sky with Mr. Perfect howling in victory like the wolf he's descended from. Yay! An unspecified amount of time later, Kion's heading back to school with his dear old dad.
And if field reporters show up at your door, kindly tell them to buzz off.
I will, Sherman. Word probably got out that Sherman and his dad have a literal freaking time machine, so he's gotta be a full-on celebrity at his school now. That or he's probably gonna be put on a watch list. So Mr. Peabody watches his little boy leave for his day. I love you, Kion.
I have a deep regard for you as well, Mr. Preposterous.
And after he and Sophia head on in, we see all the historical figures enjoying their souvenirs from their trip to modern-day New York, and Agamemnon makes the Grunion his queen after putting her in his time period with him by force. How romantic! And everybody lived, questionably influencing their future. That's that.